to Sisters in Company Talking About It live show. Hosted by me, Dr. Sharon Cradle and Sherelle Higgins. We will be discussing intriguing, intricate, inspirational, informative, and intelligent topics with our individual twists and talents.
We will present real stories, real solutions, and engage in real talk.
So we invite you to be our company every Sunday afternoon at 3:00 p.m. as we focus on transcendent thinking that will move you forward. You become the company you keep.
What company do you keep? Oh yeah, we are biological sisters by way of the south side of Chicago. So get ready to keep company with us and our guests as we talk about it.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome to Sisters in Company Talking About It. So Sharon was gracious enough today to ask me if I wanted to start off in welcoming you all to Sisters in Company, and I so gladly accepted.
Yes.
And so I just want to say good afternoon. Thank you all for joining us. We're going to have some real talk today about some real topics, and we're going to, ask you all to call in. Some of the topics we're going to talk about you might feel, just as passionate about as we do, and so we'd like to invite you to join us. Of course, I am Sherelle Higgins, your favorite co-host of this dynamic duo.
And I am Dr. Sharon Cradle, the oldest of this dynamic duo. Welcome to Sisters in Company Talking About It live. We're going to ask all of our social media followers to please log into listenvisionlive.com. And if you would like to call into the show today, the number is 833-202-TALK. And as Sherelle stated, we have some really interesting topics that we want to have some real talk about today. And your input, of course, can either confirm some things we think or what we're saying, or you may have a difference of opinion. And so please do call in. And as usual, we normally start out with scripture. And so that's exactly what we're going to do. And I really want to come from Ecclesiastes 3:1-3. And it reads, and I know everybody knows this, to everything there is a season and a time to every purpose under the heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to pluck up that which is planted, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to break down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance. And some of the topics that we're going to talk about here today really fits this theme well. And we'll bring those up as soon as Sherelle starts with the story that she would like to tell. But before we do that, we're in the DMV region. So we're in the Washington, D.C., Maryland, Virginia region. And we want to say congratulations to the University of Virginia for winning the game last night to advance to play in the national championship against Texas Tech.
Yes, congrats to UVA.
Yes.
Of course, I'll be rooting for them just because they're in Virginia and it's the right thing to do, right?
Yes.
And so, congrats to them. It was an awesome game last night. Those three free throws at the end of the game that guy made, that was everything. And when he went up to the line to take the 3 shots, I said to my husband, no pressure, right?
But you know what's interesting about that to me? I saw a lot of commentary around people saying, well, you're not supposed to, call a foul in that situation. And I didn't know what they were talking about. There was a lot of commentary around that. And a lot of people were angry. So, can you school me on what happened? Because I didn't see it.
Okay, so God went up to hit a 3-pointer, which would have made them win the game anyway. And the defensive player bumped into him. He went up with him, but he threw his body towards him as opposed to jumping backwards, so he didn't make any contact. And so while the guy was in the air, he made contact with him, so he couldn't have a clean landing.
Okay.
And so that's why they called the foul. Now, of course, every call right then and there that changed the trajectory of the game, people going to complain about.
Yes, because I'm assuming that most people thought Auburn was going to win.
Yes, because they were up.
Okay.
They were up 62 to 60. So
Don't you just like the underdogs?
yes.
You know, the underdogs. And then where did this Texas Tech come from? You know, who are they? Where did they come from? They just seem like they came from out of nowhere.
No, they didn't. They probably been around balling the whole time.
Okay. And we're just familiar with the common teams.
And
yeah.
one of the things my husband always says is that's why they play the game.
That's right.
Right? Because
Exactly.
I'm sure not very many people have Virginia, UVA, and Texas Tech as their final two teams in
No.
their brackets.
No.
So that's why they play the game. So you just never know.
And I believe this is the first time in UVA's history
Yes.
that they've ever gone to the
Yes.
championship.
Yes.
That's incredible. Mm-hmm. That's incredible.
Yeah, so they doing it. They balling. You know, congrats to both teams.
Exactly.
May the best man win tomorrow night. I'll be watching the game.
Okay, it is tomorrow night.
It's
okay.
tomorrow night.
All right.
So I'll be watching. Lucky for them, I don't have to be
Yeah.
on the soccer field tomorrow because then I wouldn't watch. I'd be
Yes.
on the soccer field watching my own baller. So speaking of my own baller, so this past week I was in California. And Thursday morning we were having breakfast. Me and my colleagues, we were having breakfast, and I was up at the breakfast bar, and my cell phone rang, and it was the boy, and so he said to me, and I was talking to him on my Apple Watch, so I was like, "Hey, what's up?" And he was like, "I'm in the security office." I'm like, "For what? What happened?" And then he was trying to say something. I was like, "Wait a minute, hold on. Let me get back to my my phone." And so I went back to my phone, and by the time I got to my phone, he hung up. So I called him back, and I was like, "Hey, what's going on?" And I could hear an adult talking in the background, and he wasn't saying anything. He was like, "Wait a minute, hold on for a minute." And then he was like, "I'm going to call you right back." So I'm like, now you know I'm already irritable. So I was like, okay. So he called me back, and he said that he was in the security guard's office because he and two of his friends, they were in PE outside on the soccer fields, and they were going to the bathroom inside the school. So they started walking towards the school, and the security guard yelled for them to stop. And my son says, and I stopped right there. I ain't say nothing. I just stopped. And so I was like, okay, so what's the problem? And then he was like, he said that he wanted us to go to the bathroom inside the stadium. And Jalen says, everybody knows that the bathrooms inside the stadium are always locked during the day. And so I was like, oh, okay. I said, and he said, so he talking about writing me a referral. So I was like, all right, whatever. I said, just tell him I'm going to see him tomorrow morning at 7 o'clock at the school. Make sure he be there. And then go tell the principal that I'm coming to see him tomorrow morning at 7 o'clock. Make sure both of them be there because I don't have time for this over no bathroom break. And so so Jalen, of course, told the security guard that. And then he called me.
Oh.
And he said, Ms. Higgins, I just wanted to call you because I know that Jalen gave you his side of the story. So now I'm instantly irritated that an adult is calling me up with some foolishness about his side of the story.
Yeah.
Right? So I said, okay, well, here's what I know. I know there's three sides, so go ahead and tell me yours.
Right.
And he said, well, I called them. I told them to stop. No, he said they had substitute teachers. And you know how kids get when it's the substitute teachers, and they were going off to the bathroom, and I yelled for them to stop, and they didn't stop, and I know they heard me. I said, sir, stop right there. I said, what's your name again? And he told me. I said, okay, well, let me say this. I said, don't tell me about they.
Right.
Tell me about my son. Tell me exactly what he did, because I don't care who they are and what they did. Just tell me about what he did. So let's start over. He said, okay. So your son was going to the bathroom, and I told him to stop, and he didn't stop the first time, and I know he heard me because he didn't have on his headphones. And so, but when I told him to stop the second time, he stopped.
Okay.
I said, okay, that sounds good.
Yeah.
What's the problem? And he was like, well, then they started arguing with me. I said, well, why are we talking about they again?
Right.
I said, are you telling me that my son was arguing with you, the adult? And he was like, he said, yeah. I said, wait a minute, hold on. I said, because I don't play no disrespect. And he was like, oh, I'm not trying to be disrespectful. I said, wait a minute, hold on. See, I'm not even talking about you. I'm talking about him. I was like, so calm down. I was like, I'm talking about him arguing with the adult is disrespectful. And he gonna say, well, when I told them to stop and they didn't, they was defying me. So I was like, oh, this is about to get real good. So then I said, tell me about the argument you had with Jalen. Tell me what you said and then tell me what he said. well, when I told them to stop, they didn't stop, and then they start arguing with me. I said, I know, that's what you said before. I'm trying to understand what the argument was about. Right. Tell me what you said and what he said so I can see, what this argument thing is happening. He couldn't tell me. So I'm like, now you're making up stuff, right? Because it just happened. The incident just happened. So I'm like, now you're making up stuff. Okay. So, and then he says, well, I'm just going, he said, because see, one of the things the kids do, they text their friends and tell their friends to come open the door and prop the door open, and that jeopardizes the kids' safety. I said, well, is that what you telling me that Jalen did? He was like, no. I said, well, then you don't need to bring that part up. I'm trying to get to the bottom of what Jalen did. Right. I said, look, sir, I'm one of them mothers. I'm usually on the side of the school, but right now I can't be on your side because you're talking stupid to me. You can't tell me nothing my son did except for he stopped when you told him to stop the second time. So I don't understand what the problem is. So he goes on to say all kinds of foolishness, and I was like, look. And then he says, well, I just write the referral. It's up to the administrator to decide if he get a warning or in-school suspension. I said, stop right there. I said, it better not be nothing more than a warning. I said, because we ain't doing no suspension behind this, and you need to figure out another way to communicate with these kids instead of trying to write them up for going to the bathroom. This is ridiculous.
And he sounded like he was frustrated and couldn't really, tease out exactly what it was Jalen did or said.
Exactly. So I was like, okay. I said, well, it better not be. I said, I'll see y'all in the morning. I said, because we ain't doing nothing but a warning on this one. And matter of fact, the more I think about it, we're not even doing no warning because this doesn't make sense. And so he goes on to say, well, I said, well, I'm going to see you and the principal in the morning. He was like, well, it wasn't even a major thing.
Oh.
So why you call me? If it's not major, why are you on my phone?
And why are they in the principal's office if it wasn't major? He could have just given the boys a warning and just sent them back to class. Wow.
So I'm like, he got issues. So now my son happy, right? Because he on the right side of the law for a change. And I know he was telling the truth because he called and told it.
Yeah.
Because when he got 3 tardies, he ain't called and say, I was tardy today. I was tardy a second day. I was tardy a third time. And when you tardy 3 times, you get suspension. He ain't mentioned nothing about none of that until I got an email from the school saying he had to go to night school suspension because he was tardy 3 times. So, I didn't argue with the school. Only thing I said was, can you reschedule him? Because he has to go to court that day to get his license and he might not be back in time. So just reschedule him. And they did. He served his night suspension and everybody was happy. But I'm like, don't call me up with no foolishness over no bathroom.
Well, let me tell you something. I don't think that we can talk enough about educators and just what goes on a daily basis that a lot of us have no idea about, and just the overall frustration, because that's what it sounded like to me. That gentleman was just frustrated, and he's talking about what the kids do. So he's carrying a lot of that, and taking it personally because, he hasn't found the way to, like you said, effectively communicate with the kids to get the kids to do what they need to do.
Well, since my son was on the right side of the law this time, he stayed up and waited for me to come home from California. And then he wanted to tell me the rest of the story. He said what happened was one of the kids was arguing with the teacher.
Right.
But the teacher, the security guard, was antagonizing the kid. And the kid said, you're not going to be talking to me like that because I'm 19 years old. And the security guard says, well, why are you still in high school if you're 19? You need to be out of high school if you're 19.
Ooh, wow.
So I'm like, first of all, since you kept telling me about you didn't ever tell me about your part in the situation.
Right.
And so don't call me up about this foolishness about no bathroom. I'm like, no, he ain't doing nothing. You can write whatever you want to on a piece of paper. I don't care. And so I didn't go up to the school the next day because I was like, I don't have time for that.
Well, one of the things that the scripture Ecclesiastes 3:1-3 talks about, there's a time to plant, right? And so what are we planting for our children in these school environments in terms of how do we model our behavior? How do we show them respect, and teach them how to be respectful? And so many people are so quick to say it is the kids' fault. And I just have a philosophy about that. They are children. Right. They just are. And it's our job as the adults to teach them the way that they should go.
Absolutely.
And children are going to do things.
Right.
Right. Are we going to condemn them forever? Are we going to make, minor infractions bigger than what they are?
Absolutely.
And so I always think that the punishment should fit the crime. And so it's just very important for, us as adults to show a little bit more emotional intelligence. And I'm not saying that, teachers don't get frustrated,
Right.
and, because you do have some kids who are just determined to do what they want to do. And then, of course, you deal with that. But don't generalize that to
Right.
all children.
Exactly.
Because all children are not that way.
Exactly. So I just couldn't believe him. I was like, if you don't get off my phone right now, it's early in the morning and you talking foolishness over something I don't even care about.
Yes.
So, yeah, that was me on Thursday.
So let me tell you all something. You all know that in our theme song and when we open the show, we always say that we're from the south side of Chicago, which we are, born and raised. How about Chicago?
Yes.
They showed up for the mayoral
Yes.
election.
Yes.
They showed up. And so we have Lori Lightfoot, who is mayoral elect. And she is the first African-American female to be elected to that position.
Yes.
And so I don't live in Chicago, so I don't, get all of the politics because I'm not there. And so what I'm going to say, and what I liked in terms of what I heard her say, was the other opponent is a black female, and they're going to work together.
Yes.
And I think that is so very important. Don't divide and conquer.
Right.
Work together, because with a team you can do more.
Yes.
And we know that Chicago has a significant political history, right? And so, I'm glad, and I'm praying that actually happens, that they actually work together.
I believe they will, because Chicago is in desperate need of some attention. They got to get that corruption out of the politics in Chicago. That's one of the most corrupt cities in the country. And, they try to talk about, the killings and stuff, but they killing us slowly with the politics in Chicago. So, kudos to Lori Lightfoot, and also to the other lady. What was her name?
I don't have her name.
Okay, yes. Something with a T. Anyway, congratulations to both of them, because we as women, we just have to do better. Clearly we are running the households in most cases, and so we need to take that same energy and start running this country, because these men are killing me softly. I'm just like, can we stop? Can we just stop? At some point, we got to start thinking about everybody and not just the select few, because it's more of us than it is of them, right? And if all of us come together, we can move them out the way and take over our country and bring our country back the way that it should be running, and make it even better.
And so I don't necessarily think about divide and conquering. I think if we do it together, because that's the only way it's going to work. We need our men to be on board,
for sure.
and the women need to be on board, and so we have to work together to make this thing happen, because we are here together.
And I'm talking about us in terms of the majority of the people versus the
I
elite,
see.
the select
Yes.
few.
Okay. Got it. Yes. And I think what Sherelle said is a great segue into our next conversation. We know that many of us know that April is Financial Literacy Month.
And my birthday.
Yeah, that's right. At the end of the month, my husband's birthday,
Yes.
my bestie's birthday,
And happy birthday to Dan, my brother-in-law.
yeah,
It's his
Dan,
birthday.
lots of people. So there's a lot going on in the month of April. But it is Financial Literacy Month. And why do I want to talk about that? I really want to talk about it in terms of what Sherelle was saying, that there are a lot of single parents running households. We know that there's been a lot of conversation around whether or not schools, public schools or K-12 schools should teach financial literacy. And we know that when we kicked the show off last year, Sherelle talked about financial literacy or financial stability, and opened up her platform to work with people. And so I want you to kind of just talk about, what that experience was like, and where are you today with some of your clients?
Well, it was a really good thing, because a lot of people just don't know what they don't know. And a lot of people had some stuff, set up, but they didn't know what to do with it or how to use it.
Yes.
And so I was able to help them make some different choices and actually look at it. And a lot of them just didn't know what, like I said, just didn't know what to do, right? And so they just keep kicking the can down the road. Oh, I'll deal with that later. And so later came last year. And it was good to work with them to show them how you could do both. You could put a little bit aside every month, every paycheck. It don't have to be a whole lot, but it builds over time. And for those of us who have, 401ks and all of that, the importance of paying attention to that money and putting that money in places where you can earn money from it. And so people are now on the right track with, getting their financial situation better under control, and really looking at their debt. right? And reducing their debt, little at a time, as opposed to trying to tackle it all at one time. So I think some people going to be better situated when it comes time to retirement as a result of that, as opposed to getting to the retirement age and thinking, oh my God, I can't afford to retire.
And one of the, again, with Ecclesiastes 3:1-3, it talks about there's a time to build up. And the time to build up is now, particularly if your goal is to retire, right? And to have something, or you're planning for your children to go to college, whatever your goals are, planning to play your house, you have to build up now.
Yes.
So that later on down the road, because time moves so quickly, before you know it, my husband was telling me the other day that we senior citizens. And I said, what? I'm like, I thought that was age 62, and I'm definitely not at age 62, but I am sweating, so I don't know.
You AARP eligible.
Exactly, but I don't. But the point is, you wake up one day and you are, mid 50s, approaching 60, and what have we built up? What have we planted and built up so that you can live longer than what you think you can live, that
absolutely.
you can have something to pull from, something to pluck, because it talks about pluck, pluck something to use to make sure that your latter years are comfortable, right? And so
you got to make a sacrifice sometime,
right?
And if you don't make it while you're working, you're gonna definitely make it in retirement.
Because we know that once we stop working, and we're fortunate to retire, and I feel blessed, and I know you all do too, working for the federal government, that you have a retirement system.
Yes.
Right. We have a pension, and to be able to say you at least have something that you can pull from, and I'm not waiting until I'm mid 50s to start saving.
Right.
And it's just so very important. And so we know that anytime we're debt free, it just gives you a different mindset. It gives you the ability to do so much more. And when we talk about, where did you learn to be financially savvy? Where did you learn to save? A lot of us have to look back in our households. And figure out, did our parents share with us how many bills they had, how much they were bringing in every 2 weeks?
That was grown folk
that
business.
Was exactly.
You better not be up in there asking Cheryl about her grown folk business.
But so I get it, but I don't get it.
Right.
Because the first teachers come from the home. And so when we grew up, like for me, when I grew up, I had to go grocery shopping and things like that. But I was given that amount of money to do it with, and that was all I kind of knew about finances. And so then you go out into the world and you have to figure it out.
Yes, you
and
do.
We know that the way that this world is going now, we have to have something stored up. And then where does it start? And we need to talk to our kids. It's just not grown folks.
Right.
Anything can happen in a family, and the children need to at least understand, what it was mommy and daddy were doing to make this household run versus just trying to figure it out. Because I heard someone saying this the other day. I remember when I went to college in 1981, I think that was around the first time that I was familiar with a credit card. And they were on campus. And they just gave us credit cards, and we didn't even understand, what a credit card was, the amount of debt, and that, oh yeah, you have to pay it back, right? And so how do we teach literacy? And what do I mean by literacy? I'm just talking about competence or having a knowledge base around a specific area. And so when we talk about financial literacy, we're talking about, like we mentioned earlier, budgeting, opening a bank account, where money comes from. Because I know many of you all have the story where, your children, you go to the bank and you have this debit card, and the kids ask you for some money, and you may have said, well, I don't have any, and the kid was like, only thing I do is go put your card in the bank. They don't understand that you have to make deposits, and based on that deposit, you can't withdraw more than what you have,
right?
And that whole budgeting. And so that is, to me, a very important conversation. And I was telling Sherelle, I've just heard a lot of conversation recently around whether or not schools should teach it. I think it should be infused, but I really believe that it should start in the home, because it is kind of taught somewhat in the schools, but it's not this like just one particular subject. Schools can't teach our children everything.
Right.
What are we going to be responsible for teaching them?
Absolutely. And as a parent, I just need this school to teach him that trick because I can't help him with that part. But
Yeah.
both my kids had bank accounts, and you can get them at 15. If at 15, I'm like, come on, because this is when the time you're going to do more than you have, and you're going to learn all that stuff. And so by the time you get out here in the real world, you got to take care of yourself. You already understand how all of this work.
Right.
And so
that's that teachable moment,
oh,
right?
absolutely.
Where you can give them guidance and direction versus coming out into the world and the world giving them that guidance and direction around how that works.
And it costs you a lot more when the world have to teach it to you.
Exactly.
And so I make sure that both Tasia and Jalen had bank accounts and understand how when you swipe that card, what that means, how to check your account online, how to make sure if it's $1 at the gas station, it wasn't really $1. It costs more than $1. They just check to see if it was valid.
Yes.
Don't spend more than you have in there.
Exactly. And I just think it's important because our kids, some are privileged, right? Some are not, and we understand that.
Yeah, mine
and
are
so,
privileged.
and then I think that will also help because I've heard story after story where parents are bailing out adult children who find themselves in these financial situations that they created, right? And so not only are they doing it one time, but they're doing it 2 and 3 times. And my thinking around that is if our older parents, if your parents are continuing to bail you out because of the choices that you're making with your money, what's going to happen when they need to retire, or some of them are retired, or they need to, some additional assistance to help take care of them, and you've already depleted their funds.
Yeah.
And so I just believe that the younger we can start with children, the better. Other than just saying, no, you can't have it. Tell them why, get them to learn some simple math, right? Some simple math, addition and subtraction.
Right. So, yeah, my kids are privileged, but they have to earn it, and they just got to figure it out. I help them figure it out. I'm not about bailing folk out. Like, if you get into like my son's account was in the negative, I wouldn't give him 1 penny until it came out. I'm like, I'm not putting my money in there to pay for it, because as soon as I put my money in there, they gonna take it, right? And so that means I'm now paying for your account to get out the negative, and that's not gonna happen. And so it was
a lesson learned.
Yeah, absolutely. It was in the negative for a while because he don't have no job. So I was like, so I think his auntie gave him some money or something, and they worked, and that got worked out. But then I was like, now I can give you some of my money because I'm not paying you out the negative. And with his lunch account, that burns my soul. I don't like to talk about the lunch account, but it's timely right here. I cannot stand that lunch account. And I told him, if that lunch account go into negative, I don't care if it's 15 cents, you owe me $5. Because it's too easy for you to check your lunch account and see how much money you have,
right,
and only spend what you have. So if you go into negative, now I'm gonna treat you like the bank. You got to pay me money. And so if it go into negative up to $5, I charge him $5. If it go in over if it go negative more than 5, I charge him 20. Because I'm like, you need to understand that this is how it works in the real world.
Right.
Nobody's just gonna let you spend money and you not have to account for what you spending, and you can't spend more than you have.
And that's what I'm talking about when I talk about financial literacy. You're giving him some real world experience, right? And not just bailing him out.
Right.
And helping him to understand that if I put this in and you go negative, then because you're not, we have these cell phones, we have all kind of technology that you can keep up with, your balance on your account.
That's
and
right.
so, and teaching them that when you get out, it's going to be the same thing.
Right.
You go negative in your bank account, there's a non-sufficient fund charge.
That's right.
And that's just the bottom line. And so you can be short $10, but the bank is going to get there whatever it is
That's
now.
right.
Whatever the amount is. They're not going to worry about whether or not it was only $10. No,
right.
You have non-sufficient funds, and so they're going to get it. And so that financial literacy, I think, is probably it's just one of the most important things I think we can do for our kids to get them prepared, other than some other thing, get them prepared for life.
Right.
And make them aware.
We have to. We owe it to them, because I don't know about any other parents out there, but I promise you I want my kids to be independent. I don't want to be one of those parents who is enabling my kids to live off of me well into their 30s and 40s. I don't have the tolerance for that. So I'm like trying to rush the process. So I ain't saying y'all wrong. I'm just saying I don't want that to be my story.
But you know what's interesting? There is a football player, and it just came to mind. I don't know he's in the NFL, and they said I've heard two different stories. They're saying that he either has not spent any of his money, or he's only spent 10% of his money, and it would be awesome to just kind of go back and listen to him speak about where that came from. And it could just be that, you know, his life, maybe he just didn't have a lot in life, and he's watched other NFL players. I don't know his story, but I think that would be great, because I think that's pretty incredible.
He's spending 10% of his money.
He's spending only 10% of his money.
I want to say he paid for the Panthers, but yeah, he's spending 10% of his money, and he's saving the rest, because he said he already know football is short lived.
And
you know, yes, because he like, I don't need all them cars and stuff. He bought his mama a house,
right?
And he like, I'm good. He's like, I don't need 13 cars, 12 horses, and 2 dogs. So he's saving most of his money, and good for him, because you gotta, especially when you have careers like that are short lived.
Right.
These are not things you can do the rest of your life.
You can get hurt.
Yeah, it can be over tomorrow.
Exactly. And then there was, I always think about this guy that played for the Washington Redskins. He was a big guy. I can't think of his name either.
All are.
No, they're not. Not all of them. But anyway, I think he was from Tennessee somewhere. But I remember them talking about him living in an apartment, and I think he was $100 million man. And he was living in an apartment like out in Northern Virginia. And I don't think he lasted with the Redskins that long. But he, you know, now took all his money and went back to Tennessee, you know, got his, you know, his land, his ranch, whatever he's doing. But that is the type of mindset that we need to train our kids, because I know I didn't always have that. I was just trying to figure life out. Right, and figuring life out with money can set you back a long time.
Yeah, but you know, the one thing is each generation gets smarter, right?
Supposedly.
Let me say, each generation is more educated. Can be more educated.
Correct.
Because right now you can find out anything you want to on the internet, and so we have a lot more information than what our parents had, and so our kids got a lot more information than what we had, and it just keep snowballing like that. And so yes, we are the generation that should be teaching our kids about financial literacy, so that when they have kids, they understand that it is their responsibility to raise their kids and pay for all of their financial needs and all of their emotional support and all of that other stuff, so that, you know, we start to build a better generation, as opposed to us raising these kids that we are enabling to be trifling adults.
Yeah, and again, when we talked about building up from the scripture, it is really important, and people think, like for instance, life insurance. We know that's a hot topic, and people for some reason think life insurance costs a lot of money. But I'm thinking to myself, it costs a lot to the family on the end if you don't have any, and putting out GoFundMe. And so why not save up? Why not get a life insurance policy that you can afford? Because what we do is we buy these cell phones, right? We buy, you know, these expensive tennis shoes. We do all this other stuff. And so I know that people can find some money, for the most part, find some money to get some life insurance. And that's that building up and trying to create some type of generational wealth. You know, leave your family with something versus leaving them in a hole. And that's part of that whole financial literacy conversation that has to occur.
Oh, absolutely. We just gotta do better. And there's too much information out here for us not to be doing better. You know, people, yes, you're gonna run into obstacles. Yes, there are always extreme A and extreme Z, but most of us fall in the middle.
Right.
And so we gotta work that middle to our advantage. And the more we know, the better we're supposed to do.
Exactly. And so that, I know all of our listeners, I know that they're doing what they have to do to become financially fit, you know, financially literate, and thinking about the future, because the future is here. It's here now.
Absolutely.
It's not something that's happening next week. It's here right now. We're living in that time. And so we wanted to talk about that because it is Financial Literacy Month. Also, so now we're going to transition, and Sherelle wanted to talk. I know I mentioned this last week with our guests, and our guests last week were phenomenal.
Yes.
Greg and Ray, and they're actually going to come back on the show with their wives, and we just couldn't get them for today. But they're going to come back and just have a deeper conversation about the men behind Greg's Auto. But Sherelle really wanted to talk about Nipsey Hussle. And his name, believe it or not, his original name is Ermias Ashdon.
Yeah, I'm not gonna try that one.
And I thought that was interesting because, that's his culture name, Nipsey Hussle. But this gentleman is just, when I read about him, it was just phenomenal. And I told Sherelle, I said, it's just interesting how somebody you've never heard of, then you read their story and it just has such an impact or confirms so many things about, what we believe.
Right.
And so what was your takeaway? What did you want to share about Nipsey?
Well, first of all, I'd never heard of Nipsey Hussle until he got shot and killed. And that is ridiculous because there is no way on God's given earth that this young man was doing the type of stuff that he was doing in his community. He didn't make national news on some front. He should have been splattered everywhere because he went back to his community, tried to make it a better place. He was hiring felons and had a no gun rule at his clothing stores. And so he was giving our African American men chances that they wouldn't have otherwise gotten. And he was doing it right in his own community. And for someone to take his life, I'm like, could it have been that serious? Could it have been? Like, why? I mean, at some point, we say Black Lives Matter. At some point, we got to start acting like Black Lives Matter. We have to do better as a community. Our black men should not be gunned down by us or anybody else. And we cannot, as a community, say we don't want the white people killing us, but it's okay for us to kill each other. We have to do better. We have to do better. And we know better. We know better. And so we got to make sure that we are not just selfishly taking people's lives. And so this young man has not only given back to his community, he was on the verge of doing some big things and really employing people who look like him and people who went through the struggle that he went through. He was able, because of his death, he was able to bring the gang members of LA together and do a peaceful rally and call the truce just at least for a little while. And if that can continue on, imagine the power we could do if we just got together in our communities and opened up stores and hired each other. Just think about what that could do. That's going to be much more beneficial to us as a community than shooting and killing each other over something that's senseless. Not only did we lose Nipsey Hussle, but we lost the young man who pulled the trigger.
Right.
I don't know him, but we lost him too. That's two African-American men we done lost in our community over what? Nobody knows. His mom is got to be struggling. Nipsey's mom is struggling. Nipsey's kids. This young man, I don't know if he had kids or not, but he probably have kids, right?
His
just
family. Just
everybody, everybody that's touched by this. We have to do better.
And so let me tell you a little bit, because what we hear in the news is they give us, just bits and pieces of this man's life. And so I really went back and looked at his life because as you said, I just didn't know who he was. That's why I knew he had a different name. His birth name is Ermias Ashdon, and he was 33 years old. And let me tell you what's so powerful about that. When I did the research on his name actually means God is risen. And any of y'all that's following me right now is about to get chills. We know Jesus Christ, the same, around the same age, and all of that. And so his mother and father were very, very specific and intentional about his name. Right. But he had a vision for South LA, as most of you all probably know. And of course, he at the age of 19, based on the money that he was earning hustling on the streets, he decided to buy a plane ticket to go to Africa, where his father was from. And his father was from a place called Eritrea. Africa, which is right near Ethiopia, right? And so when he purchased that ticket, he went for the first time to kind of understand his full story, his full history in terms of who he was and where he came from. And that's when he met so many of his family members, and he was just blown away by people of color that looked like him running things. And so it shifted his mindset, and it took him, and I think someone, I want to say Dr. Avis talked about this today, or put this out there today, that if we're not traveling the world, then our thinking is limited.
Oh, absolutely.
And so this young man, he traveled the world. He went to Africa, where he was from, and he saw a different place, how they were operating, who was in charge, and it shifted his mindset from, wanting to be in a gang to, transitioning to be a rapper, and then transitioning to be an entrepreneur. And he obviously was gifted. I've never listened to his music. I'm probably going to go back now and just kind of listen to what kind of messages, but based on my research, his messages were just about that. So when he came back from Africa visiting his family as a 19-year-old, he decided that he was going to change his life and do something to uplift his community. And what more can you ask for? Right? What more can you ask for? And so he started going down that road. And one of the very first things he did was he created his own record label and signed with Atlantic Records. But when he signed with Atlantic Records, he signed a deal that allowed him to keep his masters.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And when he did that, he started selling his records for his CDs for $100, but those were those masters, right? Those were these limited editions, so to speak, and that's how he was able to begin raising money for the strip mall for his store. And so he had a big vision. And let me tell you something. Somebody mentioned Jay-Z earlier. And, one of my good friends, she absolutely loved Jay-Z.
Yes,
she knows
she
every
does.
song,
Every
Jay-Z,
word.
every lyric. And I just thought that was so phenomenal that Jay-Z, when this young man, created these limited editions and started selling them for $100, that Jay-Z immediately bought 100 from him, right? And that is what kind of, put him out front in the rap world. And so this young man was just dynamic.
Yeah, and Jay-Z also set up a $15 million trust fund for his kids.
Interesting.
Yes, and and so he also I don't know if he was dating Lauren London or if they were actually married, because there's two different versions of that going around. But he was dating. He was with Lauren London for the past 5 years. They had a young son, like 2.5 years old. And, of course, she, is devastated at this point and going through this god-awful grief that she's going through. And there's another rapper, Kodak Black. Kodak Black. What's his name, Easy? Kodak Black? Okay, we got a young one in the studio. He can help me out. He on the Instagram, Twitter talking about he going to give Lauren a year and SHIT to cry and go through this, but after that he gonna shoot his best shot.
Okay, all right.
So hold on, I'm going somewhere with this.
Okay.
So of course people were tearing him up on Twitter. So it was interesting to me to see the difference in the response between Tank and the game. So Tank's response, he did the video response, and he basically was like, Black, chill. It's too soon for that. Dude, not a good look. Let's take 2 steps backwards. And then the next video was the game. He went in. Every other word was cursing. And it was just, the 2 videos was just so extreme. And I was just like, this is ridiculous. Like what are we doing? Like, we don't even take the loss of death serious anymore. Like Kodak Black, you couldn't think of nothing else to do right now? Like, really? Come on, man.
Well, people are opportunists, right? And people always try to find moments where they can, highlight themselves. So it's not about, and that's part of the problem, I think. I think that's part of the problem with what probably happened with this young man. We don't know what that was about, but really, was it that serious that you had to go and kill this man? Now your life is ruined too.
Right.
And we talk about vision. If we don't have a vision for a better world, if we don't have a vision for better to have better lives for ourselves, then you're just kind of operating. And I'm thinking that the young man that did this didn't have a vision. He just did not have a vision. And for that young man to have a vision to revitalized that strip mall to own it, and even the name of his store. And this is what I'm talking about. When people come on this earth, they are purposed to do certain things, and that young man was doing it. He named the store the Marathon.
Marathon clothing, yes.
Think about what marathon means. He knew, I'm assuming, that he knew that the change that he was trying to, invoke or create in that neighborhood was going to take time. It was going to be a marathon, and that there had to be, step by step by step, because he wanted the community to be run by the residents.
Right.
And so because he was familiar and knew the residents, he knew what it was going to take to get the kind of change, that visionary change that he saw. So he had an incredible life, actually, to be so young.
Right. And my condolences to everybody involved, because we just have to do better. We got to take back control of our communities. We just have to do better. We got to take back control of our kids. We owe it to ourselves, and we owe it to our neighbors to just do better. Nipsey Hussle was a young soul with aging thoughts and aging dreams and processes and plans and
action.
And
he was into action.
Yes,
he just wasn't.
action.
Yes.
And definitely action. And so, too bad his life was cut short. Too bad.
And as I was preparing for this, of course, this morning the very first thing I heard was about the murders and the young men that got shot here in D.C. last night.
Oh,
That's the very first thing that you hear, and to me, I don't even know where to start with that conversation in terms of why the violence, why the hatred, for each other, why, try to, and because so many of these men are probably very bright,
Yes, for sure.
But something is missing, and I don't know what that is, but something different needs to happen, and it takes each of us, right? It takes one individual, and that's what Nipsey did. He didn't try to tell everybody else what they needed to do. He decided to make some adjustments in his life to try to make a difference, and that's really how it starts. And his exposure, and that's really what I wanted to talk about. His exposure, I'm not sure what made him buy that ticket to go to Africa, but it was purpose, and so that exposure gave him a different on what could be,
right?
Because he saw what was, and so he's like, well, if they can do this over here in a country that was war torn and had, I think they separated from Italy, and so that therefore the fair skin, and so you have this country that fought to liberate themselves and to, be who they are. That's where he gets his genes from. And we talk about that. We talk about, where do you come from? Why are you so determined? Why? And if you look down your family line, you will hopefully be able to determine why that is.
And when you talk about, this story is very timely when you talk about financial literacy, right?
Yes.
It took him to go to Africa to get his financial literacy. That experience helped him become more aware from a financial standpoint. And so, we have to start educating ourselves, right? And we have to ask questions of people who may have a little bit more information than what we have, or maybe can explain something that you don't necessarily understand. And so I think if we start to ask those questions, when people ask you questions, be willing to share. Right? Don't try to hoard all the information for yourself. Don't have the crabs in the barrel mentality. We all got to come together as a community and help one another. And you may know something that I don't know. I may know something you don't know, but we got to be willing to share information.
And the thing is, if you don't like what he's doing, don't try to tear him down.
Right.
Go do what you want to do.
Right.
Go and make a difference in terms of your life, in terms of what you want to do. And it doesn't have to be the same thing, but if we can team up, the farther we can go with each other. We can go very far helping each other and learning from each other, because I'm sure there was a serious learning curve for him. I don't know where he got his financial literacy from. I'm thinking there's a learning curve in his thinking. He probably did a lot of reading to say, I need to own my own stuff.
Right. Exactly.
You know, and you keep talking about, information is at our fingertips, and that is absolutely correct. But you got to be able to weed through it.
Oh,
because
absolutely.
there's so much conflicting information out there. How do you get to what is right for you, and what information are you going to use to move forward with your own plans?
You definitely got to weed through it, and you got to use some common sense. Don't leave that out, and you got to read more than one source, because you just never know what kind of nuggets you're gonna run across reading from all different sources of a variety of information. There's a lot of print out there. I get most of my information by reading, because I just like to read. So I look at different resources to see what can I learn, because one set of somebody might be telling you something that sounds good, but may not necessarily work for you.
Right.
So you just got to find the right ingredients and the right mixture for you, and then go forward with that. And again, ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask your questions.
And one of our Facebook followers said, also, even if we can't travel right away, we can read things that give us knowledge and exposure. It gives you knowledge, but not necessarily the exposure, right? Because the exposure is really about your knowledge and your experience meeting together, right? Because I can read a lot of things, and of course you have vivid imaginations, but until you go, until you touch it, until you feel it, it is so important. And we know that there are communities of people who have never been outside of their communities.
Right.
And so they're not exposed. And so that lack of exposure, can limit you in terms of what you believe and what you think, because you only see this 4-block radius, right? And so that exposure piece is so important. And this brings up another point. When Hurricane Katrina, nothing irritated me more when people were saying, well, why didn't they just leave? Why didn't they just leave? And I'm saying, to go where?
Right.
When all they know is
New
that
Orleans.
their family, everything is right there. They've never been anywhere. I was telling my husband the other day that I met a guy when I was doing some work down in Greenville, North Carolina, and he said, I've never left Greenville. And I know this gentleman was older than I was. And I thought to myself, wow. And he said he has a brother that lives in another state. And I said, well, you didn't go visit your brother? And it wasn't as if the guy didn't necessarily have the means. He didn't look like he did not have the means. He just, I guess, for some reason, just always stayed home and never went outside of Greenville. And that's just mind-boggling. But that's a lot of people's story.
It is.
And so until you get exposed to something, how do you really know?
Right. Yeah, you got to get out there. It's a whole big old world out here, and it's way more available to you at low cost, right? If you wait for the right time, don't have no dates set aside that you just have to go. If you just go with whatever date is cheap, you can go visit a lot of places. And, we have to get out and know that other people don't necessarily live like us. It make us stop and think about how we take certain things for granted.
Yes, it does.
Because here in America, we're one of the richest countries. We used to be, I don't know if we still are. But we, got a lot of resources here, and the wealth is available here, and so it's more likely that you could be middle class than not.
I think it depends on where you live, because there's some
absolutely.
people across this country that's struggling.
Oh, absolutely, a whole lot of them.
Yeah, because of lack of jobs and opportunity and all kinds of things, and just medical issues that have stripped the families their budgets and everything.
Absolutely, I agree with all of that, and I also know that in this country, right, we have a lot of programs available to assist people where other countries don't have that. People are just destitute. People don't have clean. We know some people over here don't have clean drinking water, but don't bring that up. But people just live differently than we do as Americans, and we just take things for granted. And I think that we got to start figuring out. I started even with myself. I started going through, got rid of a lot of stuff because I just had massive amounts of clothes and shoes and pocketbooks. It was just crazy. And so I went
trying to be a minimalist.
No, I'm not ready for that yet. I'm just downsizing in my mind, right?
Yeah.
So I'm taking it in phases. And so I donated all of that stuff because I'm just like, it's just too much. And you can't wear it all. And you're not going to wear it all. So the sense of hoarding it just didn't make sense to me. So we just got to do better. Give back however you can. It don't always have to equal money. just give back.
Right. And I would like to end the show. When I first heard the young man's name, Nipsey Hussle, I kept saying Nipsey Russell. And I guess I'm dating myself.
Yes, you are.
If you all don't know who Nipsey Russell is, some of you millennials and some folks younger, Nipsey Russell, of course, was a comedian and a poet and a dancer back in I think the 1970s, 60s and 70s. All the way up to, I think, around 1990s into the 90s. And actually, he was on like talk shows and game shows for the most, and some of the game shows were To Tell the Truth, Pyramid, Match Game, Password, and Hollywood Squares. And so if you hear people, mixing the names up and saying Nipsey Russell, that gentleman, I'm not even sure if he's still alive.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, but yes, and so he was famous as a comedian and a dancer, and he was on game shows. So check him out and learn a little bit of history about who Nipsey Russell was. And I found it very interesting that that this young man, they called him Nipsey Hussle, and I'm not sure where they got that name from, which is very interesting. So, but we just really wanted to come and talk with you about these topics, and this particular topic is just near and dear to our heart because it's about our community. It's about how we see each other, how we treat each other.
More importantly, how we treat each other.
And there has to definitely be some healing, right?
Yes.
Some healing and some forgiveness and some and the ability to take ownership of where we live in our communities and wanting it to be better.
Yes.
Because if we want it to be better, then it can be better. And it really is just that simple. And so I think that's what that young man was trying to do. And I'm thinking about his mother. No one really talks about his mom. His mother, I can't imagine what she is going through. So our hearts and we pray for the family and send condolences to everybody that was connected to him.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you all for joining us. We will see you next week. We're going to have some interesting guests on the show next week.
Yes.
You don't want to miss it.
Yes.
So we'll see you all next week. Thank you for tuning in.
Thank you all. Have a blessed afternoon. Welcome to Sisters in Company Talking About It live show.